We will learn today about the intramural transportation, storage, and extramural transportation of healthcare waste. So, the transportation of waste from the place where it is generated, collected to the storage site is called intramural transportation or transportation within the facility or within the healthcare facility. It is also called in house transportation of waste. Now, intramural transportation of waste is, as I said, from the site of generation after it is collected. Now, what are the characteristics of the waste once it is collected at the site of generation? All the bags which contain the waste should have the biohazard symbol. They should be properly closed with a tie or they should be knotted. They should be labeled and they should be barcoded. And the main purpose of barcoding is so that it can be tracked down right from the generation to the point of disposal. Now we come to what is the characteristic features of the transportation. Once the waste is packed, labeled, it is picked up for transportation. This is done through closed trolleys so that there are no chances of spillage or the infections being spread, and the size of the trolleys which are taken should depend upon the amount of waste that is generated or produced at the generation site. And since the wastes have to be collected in different color coded bins, they also must be transported in the same color coded trolley. Now, what are the various features of a transport vehicle or a trolley that is used for transporting waste inside a healthcare facility? Now, these vehicles should have wheels for easy maneuverability. They should be of the same color as the category of waste that they transport, and they should also have the label for the biohazard waste. There are other precautions that should be maintained by the personnel who are transporting the waste. All the healthcare personnel and workers who are handling the healthcare waste should wear the proper personal protective equipment, also called the PPE, and they should also adopt the proper body mechanics, that is how they handle the waste, how they pick up the waste, how they transport the trolley, otherwise they are prone to injuries. Now, the routes that a transport vehicle adopts inside the hospital is also very much important. This should be planned in such a way that the waste should be carried out during low activity time. That is, it should not be when there is a heavy load of the visitors. Also, the frequency that it is to be collected will depend upon the amount of waste that is being generated. The ward which generates very little waste, then waste collection may be done only once a day. Whereas if it is in a very busy OPD or a OT which is running around 8 hours, then you may need to collect 2 times or even 3 times the waste from that particular site of generation. Now we have storage of waste. Many times, ideally, the storage of waste we should not store waste in the healthcare facility, and the waste should be transported to the treatment facility as soon as it is collected. But in large hospitals where the generation of waste is huge and maybe twice a day, we may require to have a central storage place where the waste is stored for some time and before the vehicle from the central treatment facility comes, because as per the BMW rules 2016 amended, it is very important that all the healthcare facilities will not treat their own waste if they have got a central biomedical waste management and treatment facility within 75 kilometers of their premises. It is only in the remote areas or in areas which are very far from the central treatment facility that they may need to manage their waste. Now, what are the various characteristics or features that a central storage area must have? It must be away from the public visitors, and it should be located in a designated temporary waste collection station. It should be always kept under lock and key. It should in fact have the entrance. Accessibility should be through a ramp for easy transportation and collection trolleys. And there should also be a provision for water supply for them to clean and wash the station and also wash the trolleys. And all the wastewater that is being produced must be connected to the ETP of the healthcare facility to ensure that the wastewater is also properly treated before it is disposed of in the general sewerage system of the hospital. Now, the storage area should be properly roofed, well lighted and ventilated, and they should have adequate space for storing waste and also for washing facilities. Now, whenever the waste is received in the storage area, it should be recorded, and as per the records, the amount of waste that is coming, the type of waste that is coming, who has brought the waste, and also barcode management system should be in place. After this, the waste is taken for treatment and disposal to a central treatment facility. Now this extramural transportation, it is called, that is transporting the waste from the healthcare facility to the central treatment facility, is called extramural transportation. Guidelines have been provided how this waste should be transported. So the vehicles which come should be special vehicles for transporting only biomedical waste. They should not carry the general waste with them. They should have the biohazard symbol very broadly and prominently displayed on the vehicle. This waste should take directly from the central treatment, it should take from the healthcare facility to the central treatment facility. And this waste that is being taken should also have trained personnel in the vehicle so that they know that if there is some accident or some spillage, then it can be handled. So this is about the guidelines of the intramural transport, storage, as well as the extramural transportation. Now we will see a small video. Waste is collected at a fixed time from the site of waste generation. The frequency of collection depends upon the amount of waste generated. The timing of waste collection should match the pattern of the waste generation in such a way so as to minimize or nullify the use of interim storage of waste in the departments. Before handing over the waste in intramural or in-house transportation, the waste bags should be labeled with the date, type of waste and point of generation. They should be barcoded to allow them to be tracked through disposal. All the bags used for collection must be labeled with the warning symbol of biohazard or cytotoxic waste as per the category of waste. The records of waste must also be maintained before the waste is transported to the storage area. Plastic bags should be tied and placed in the bins of the same color. General waste should not be collected at the same time or in the same trolley as infectious or other hazardous waste. In-house transportation or intramural transportation of biomedical waste from the site of waste generation to the interim storage center within the premises of the hospital must be done in closed containers only, preferably fitted with wheels for easy maneuverability. Such trolleys or carts are designed for the purpose of biomedical waste collection only. Transportation should be carried out through a route avoiding high-risk areas and high-traffic areas of patients and visitors. The storage area should be free from the public or visitors' access. Care should be taken to avoid spillage and scattering of waste. All the waste received in the storage area must first be weighed before storing. The storage area should be roofed, well ventilated and free from animals. The space should be planned to be able to store the waste generated for at least 2 days. There should be provision of water supply and preventive measures should be available for fire accidents. This was a very short video, but I think it summed up very nicely all the procedures that are required, guidelines that are required to be followed for intramural transportation, storage and extramural transportation. Management of spill. We will be dealing with an infectious spill to begin with, and principles of a chemical spill management are similar though not same. So over here we will be talking only of an infectious spill, and the infectious spills is generally spilling of blood or body fluids. Why is management of spill important? Spills of blood or body fluids are infectious in nature because they could be having potential microorganisms, and this kind of liquid, that is blood or body fluids, could result in spread of these infections. This could be if we have got cuts on our hand, if it comes in contact with the mucous membrane, for example, if there are splashes and it comes into our eyes or into the mucous membrane of our mouth. So we need to manage spills. Now, healthcare associated infections. What are healthcare associated infections? Healthcare associated infections are infections that are not present in a patient at the time of admission, but they may develop when the patient comes in a hospital and he develops new infections, and this infection is taken from the microorganisms are taken from the environment of the hospital. So it is called healthcare associated infections. So we require to have certain standard precautions to prevent the infections which he could get while coming in the hospital. First and foremost is hand hygiene. As you all are aware that practicing hand wash or hand rub, these are two methods in which hand hygiene should be practiced, in which we get rid of the germs of our hands. Now, other method of standard precaution is personal protective equipment, that is wearing gloves, wearing mask, cap, goggles. These are all personal protective equipment which help to protect you from exposure to the various infectious agents present in waste. Then we have prevention and management of injuries with sharps. Sometimes we may get injured while trying to take blood sample, trying to inject medicine, and then we do not dispose of this syringe in a proper manner, and so we prick ourselves. We also need to have safe work practices in such a way that we do not endanger ourselves to the exposure of these microorganisms. Environmental cleaning by the use of proper disinfectants is another important measure, and safe waste disposal is of paramount importance, so that all the potential infections are again not spread to the people who are handling waste, storing waste, transporting waste or disposing waste. Now we come to the spill management of body and blood, body fluids or blood. These can be encountered while working in the healthcare environment. And why it is important, as I said, that we can expose ourselves to various infections. Most common are hepatitis B virus, HIV virus, hepatitis C virus, and other infections. In case of a person is suffering from vomiting, then diarrhea, then we can have rotavirus, hepatitis A virus. These are also there in the blood. Before we can do the spill management, the first and foremost thing is to assemble all materials which are required to be dealing with the spill. And all this is known as the spill kit. So you must arrange the spill kit before you put on the PPE. Now let us see what are the materials and how we can manage a spill. The first, inspect the area around the spill thoroughly for any splatters or splashes. Restrict the activity around the spill until the area has been cleaned and disinfected and is completely dry. Use the proper personal protective equipment, wearing all the protective equipment, which includes the water impervious gloves, waterproof apron, the gown, then rubber gloves and rubber boots. And preferably she should use the goggles to protect from splashes which may occur while cleaning. Now pour 1 to 10% of the bleaching solution over the spill, depending upon what is the nature of the spill. Absorb and remove all traces of the spill with paper towels or other acceptable materials like microencapsulation. You must be very careful that while you are pouring the disinfectant, you do not contaminate the outside of the bottle. After you have removed the towel which has wiped the spill and the disinfectant, again respray the bleach solution and allow it to dry. Place all the waste material including disposable PP into a plastic autoclavable biohazard bag, and be careful again not to contaminate the outside of the bag. The mattress, rugs and other large items that cannot fit in the biohazard bag can be wrapped in the plastic wrap after being decontaminated. After this has been done, disinfect the spill area with a hospital grade disinfectant for a contact time as per the manufacturing recommendation. Wipe the area and also prevent any splashes during cleanup. Once you have cleaned, remove your personal protective equipment, discard it in the appropriate bag and perform hand hygiene. So these are the steps that you must follow for a spill management. After a spill has occurred, it is very important to report and this is a reporting form which has been provided in the biomedical waste management rules, and you must report accordingly. Now we will see a small video. Blood spills or other human body fluid spills that occur in the environment need to be decontaminated. Take your spill kit or assemble the materials required for dealing with the spill prior to putting on your personal protective equipment. The components of the spill kit are scraper, color-coded waste bags, sodium hypochlorite solution, soap solution, scissors and adhesive tape. The absorbent material available in the kit are gauze, the spill management kit also contains personal protective equipment for management of the spill. These consist of heavy-duty latex gloves, mask, gown, goggles, face shield, apron and gumboots. Wear your personal protective equipment. Let us see how a spill is managed. Restrict the activity around the spill until the area has been cleaned and disinfected. Inspect the area around the spill thoroughly for splatters or splashes. Confine and contain the spill. Pour sodium hypochlorite solution over the spill and wait for some time. Put the absorbent material over the spill and wipe clean the spill. Put the test tube in a container having sodium hypochlorite solution for pre-treatment before discarding in the blue bag. Put the soiled absorbent material in the yellow bag. Clean the floor. The bag should be tied before discarding in the yellow bin. Disinfect the entire spill area with a disinfectant or soap solution. You saw this very short video of spill management, which gave you a rough idea how the spills should be managed. So, hand hygiene. Now, before we go ahead, we must understand what is hand hygiene. Now, hand hygiene is washing hands with plain or antibacterial soap and water, or using alcohol gel to decontaminate the hands. Hand hygiene is very important. Why? Because it prevents healthcare associated infections. There are so many microorganisms, as we said, especially in the infectious waste. To protect ourselves, the most effective and simple measure is to wash hands. Now, when should we wash hands if we are going to deal with healthcare waste or in a healthcare setting? What are the moments when should we perform hand hygiene? So, the first step that has been recommended by WHO is before we contact any patient. The second step is before we perform any aseptic task. The third step is after body fluid or blood exposure risk. After a patient contact, after you have examined the patient or you have changed the bedding of the patient, changed the clothes of the patient, and then after contact with patient surroundings. Other occasions are also required when hand hygiene should be practiced. For example, immediately after arriving for work, after handling healthcare waste, after removing gloves and overalls, after using toilet, before eating, after cleaning a spill, and before leaving the work. So the precautions that we must follow is before we perform hand hygiene. This is very important. We should remove all jewelry on the arms and forearms. We should keep the nails short and without nail polish. We should wear clothing with short sleeves. Now, what is the technique of hand washing? We will go through the steps one by one, and then I will show you a short video in which you will learn how hand washing can be performed. The first step is wet your hands adequately with water. Take enough soap to cover all hand surfaces. Rub your hands palm to palm, one palm with the other palm. Then rub your hands right palm over the left dorsum, that is on top of the left hand, and vice versa, that is the left dorsum on the right palm. Then palm to palm with fingers interlaced. After that, back of the fingers to opposing palms with fingers interlocked. Then rotational rubbing of the left thumb clasped in the right palm, and then the vice versa, that is the right thumb clasped in the left palm. And then rotational rubbing backwards and forwards with clasped fingers of the right hand in the left palm and vice versa. And then rinse in water. Dry the hands thoroughly with a single-use towel. Use the towel to turn off the tap. Your hands are now safe. So let us see a video.
Open the tap. Wet your hands. Take sufficient amount of the solution and rub vigorously, and then start with the main steps. That is, first is palm to palm. Each step for the 5 seconds. This is the first step is palm to palm. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then now right palm over the left dorsum for 5 seconds. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then again the left palm over the right dorsum. Again for the 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then palm to palm with finger interlaced. This is for the 5 seconds. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the rotational rubbing of the right palm over the left dorsum. It is like this. The rotation is like this for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And the same with the opposite palm. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And now the rotational rubbing of the thumb. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now again with the opposite hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now rotational rubbing of the nails. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now wash your hands. Don't touch the tap with your hands. Now close the tap. Take the tissue and then dry.
So I think we learnt a lot about hand wash, and we learnt about the public health risk. Personal protective equipment, or PPE. Now let us first learn what is PPE. PPE, or personal protective equipment, is the equipment that protects the user from the risks while working. What is the importance of using PPE? PPE must be worn while handling healthcare waste. And why should we use PPE while handling healthcare waste? Because healthcare waste is hazardous, it could be infectious, and PPE gives us protection from sharp injuries, which can cause a number of infections like hepatitis B, tetanus, HIV. it also helps to protect us from the direct contact with the blood and the body fluids which may be present in the healthcare waste. For example, in the soiled cotton, in the soiled clothes, mask. It also helps to protect us from exposure to hazardous chemical substances. For example, mercury, lead and other such hazardous chemicals. So it acts as a barrier both against infections and as chemicals. Now what are the components of PPE, especially for the healthcare waste? Let us see one by one. The first is waterproof apron, a scrub suit. Then we have heavy duty rubber boots. We have a disposable gown. We have face mask. We have a cap. We have heavy duty gloves. We have face shields, which may always not be required, but especially when we expect certain splashes, then face shields as well as goggles may be required to be worn as part of the PPE. Then for people who are working with incinerators, we require special PPE which are more resistant because the incinerators are also having a lot of heat which is generated there. So we will require a helmet. We will require heat resistant safety goggles, a respiratory mask, heavy duty and heat resistant gloves, an apron, scrub suit and heavy duty heat resistant boots. Now it is the duty of every occupier or operator to provide PPE. An occupier is an administrative head of a healthcare facility and an operator is the in charge of the central treatment facility. Now let us go into the sequence of wearing PPE. Perform hand hygiene now. Now wear the scrub suit and the boots. Step 3, wear the gown, wear the face mask. If it is required to put on the face shield or goggles, they should be worn now. And if available, we must put on the head cover. After this, perform hand hygiene and then put on the gloves. Last, you must place the waterproof apron over the gown. Procedure for removing the PPE. The first procedure is for disposing of the apron safely. Then we have step 2 in which we have to remove the gown. The third step is remove gloves by rolling inside out. After that, remove the boots without touching them because now you have taken off your gloves and so you would not like to contaminate your hands with whatever contaminants may be present on the boots. Perform hand hygiene now. Remove the head cover from behind the head. Remove the facials or goggles from behind the head and remove the mask. Again, perform hand hygiene because there could be certain splashes which may have come on your mask, on your head cover, on your face shield. So for any contamination which may have come to your hands, you must perform the hand hygiene again. Now remove the PPE after handling the healthcare waste, and this must be removed. You must not move with the PPE because you will be carrying the germs everywhere. Now the PPE after removal, if it has to be disposed of, if it is the disposable variety, it should be put in the yellow bin, and used during handling cytotoxic waste must be put in the yellow bags with a cytotoxic label and must be given separately. Now if it becomes soiled, sometimes it is possible it becomes soiled, torn or damaged. Now remove the PPE as soon as possible because then the contamination of self as well as the surfaces can increase. Wash the affected area with soap and water and replace the PPE immediately. If we do not take off the PPE and we prolong the use of PPE, whether they are soiled or even otherwise, then there is contamination chances increase of the work environment, and also there is risk of infection of the workers, patients as well as the visitors to the healthcare facility. Now depending upon the institutional guidelines, you will be using either the single-use PPE or reusable PPE. This is generally decided as a policy of the healthcare facility, and you can also have a say in when the policies are being decided depending upon your experience of how much waste you are handling, what is the type of PPE you are using, whether it is useful, would you like to change from disposable to reusable and so forth. Now disinfecting following the laid down procedures and properly stack all PPE for further use. This is particularly for those countries where we are not following the biomedical rules. So you may have different disposable guidelines from country to country and those guidelines must be followed. But remember always that personal protective equipment should be worn while collecting, transporting, storing and disposing of waste. During all these activities, it is important to wear all the PPE and in the procedure which has been shown. Now I will be showing you a short video in which you will just see some of the steps which are being used for the collection for the PPE. Sure that PPE are available adequately and accessible to all the sanitary or cleaning staff in their work area. Put on the rubber boots in the changing room. Move to the clean area. Wear the apron. Wear the cap. Face mask and the latex gloves. Hospital administrators must ensure that PPE are available adequately and accessible to all the sanitary or cleaning staff in their work area. Put on the rubber boots in the changing room. Move to the clean area. You saw this was a very short film, but it will give you an idea that how important PPE is. You saw all the healthcare personnel over there were wearing PPE and the procedure in short, very short. So we come to post-exposure prophylaxis, which is very commonly known as PEP. Now, what is post-exposure prophylaxis? Why do we really require it? Now, when we are all working in a hospital environment or a healthcare facility, the infectious hazards, there are a number of infectious hazards that a worker can be exposed to. For example, he can be exposed to a sharp injury when he is either from the needle, when he is taking a sample or he is giving an injection. Similarly, when a procedure is being performed, the scalpel or the blades, one can injure oneself. Wearing the gloves, then the gloves can also get torn and injured. And then there can be various blood spills or body fluids which may spill, and our body may come in contact with it. If we have some cuts or abrasions, then we can get injured by that. So what happens if this infectious waste, we come in contact with this infectious waste, what can happen? So we can get a large number of infections because we do not know how infectious a particular person may be. He has come to the hospital, he has got some infection. There may be some infections which are diagnosed, there may be some infections which may not have been diagnosed, but he is still carrying those infectious agents in his blood. For example, hepatitis B, for example, HIV, and also tetanus. So these are the infections that we are exposed to when we come in contact with the body fluids or the blood of any patient. Now, what are the body fluids in addition to blood that are contaminated or could be contaminated and which can affect our health if we come in contact with them, or which carries the infectious agents and we can be exposed to them? One is the cerebrospinal fluid, that is the fluid around our brain. We have the semen. We have the synovial fluid, which is around the joints. We have the pericardial fluid, that is around the heart. We have the amniotic fluid, which is around a fetus in the womb of a pregnant woman. We have the peritoneal fluid, which is in our peritoneal cavity or our abdominal and other cavity inside the body. And we have vaginal secretion. So all these body fluids we may come in contact when we perform various procedures in a particular hospital setting. Now, what does everybody who comes in contact with this infectious fluid or blood get infected? So the risk of infection basically depends upon the amount of infectious material that is involved in the exposure. If it is a small amount, then chances are little less than if a large amount we have exposed to. The amount of virus in the source of blood and whether the post-exposure prophylaxis has been taken within the recommended time or not. Now, what are the types of exposure which pose a risk to exposure or risk of hazard? The first is injury with a needle or any other sharp. The second is the splashes or direct contact with the mucous membranes of the eye or the mouth, because the mucous membrane has got the property of absorbing the fluid and the infections very easily as compared to the skin. The skin of our body is a protective barrier and it helps to protect us from the various infections and infectious agents. Similarly, contact with non-intact skin. As I told you that skin is very protective, but if the skin has been chapped, braided, or it may have been there may be a cut you are having, a lesion you are having, a wound you are having, open wound or dermatitis. So all these can cause a potential risk to you because they can absorb the entry of the infectious agents can take. And prolonged contact with even intact skin in some cases, in some infectious agents, can result in exposure. So how do we protect ourselves from exposure? Now, the protecting is that we should wear the proper personal protective equipment, and which consists of the gown, the gloves, apron, cap, mask, and shoes or rubber boots. And in case we are doing a procedure or there is a spill somewhere in which we feel that there could be some fumes, there could be a spray, splash, then goggles and face mask may also be required to be worn. And especially when we are dealing with waste, then the type of gloves which should be worn are different, and these are the rubber gloves, and also the shoes are the rubber shoes because they are more thick. So even if there is a chance of an injury, the needle pricking your finger is much reduced. So there is a reduced chances of injury and also reduced chances of exposure in case there is an injury. What are the immediate measures that must be taken when there is an exposure or there is an injury? The needle sticks and cuts should be washed with soap and water immediately. The splashes to the nose, mouth or skin, especially if it is a broken skin, should be flushed with water. The eyes should be irrigated with clean water, saline or sterile irrigants. And the supervisor must be immediately informed of the accident. These are the immediate measures which must be taken in case there is any needle stick injury, sharp injury or an exposure or contact with the infectious contaminated agents having blood or body fluids. There are also certain don'ts, what one should not do, and these are: never use an antiseptic, do not use soap or disinfectant for splashes in the mouth, do not squeeze the injury site, and do not put the exposed, cut or bleeding finger in the mouth. Now, all accidents that are there must be reported. And this is a form which is out of the Gazette notification of the BMW Rules 2016, Government of India. For example, the date and time of accident, the type of accident, the sequence of events that led to the accident, and this form is very important for the remedial measures and for the follow-up measures. For example, if you see the sequence of events that led to the accident is important because it helps us to plan that in future we do not have similar accidents and how we can prevent the accidents. So we try to learn from whatever accidents happened through these reporting systems, that in what way can we minimize the occurrence or the chances of the similar accident. Then has the authority been informed immediately, because reporting of all accidents is very important. The type of waste involved in the accident, again in this way we know that what are the potential waste that are more prone to cause accidents, and so we take care of either changing the kind of the equipment or how they should be handled, how they should be transported. Those all things can be seen. Assessment of the effect of accidents on the human health and environment. What are the preventive measures? What are the remedial measures that have to be adopted? The emergency measures that are taken so that we can plan better. What kind of kit should be available so that we plan whenever there is an accident? The steps taken to alleviate the effects of accident, the steps taken to prevent the recurrence, what have been taken, and then what we can take. Does your facility have an emergency control policy, which is very important, which should be put in place? We will show you a very small video of post-exposure prophylaxis, that how it happens and what are the measures that should be taken. Exposure to blood, body fluids or other infectious waste increases the chances of contacting disease-causing microorganisms. needle stick injuries are a common cause of transmitting hepatitis B, hepatitis C and HIV infections.
अरे मुझे needle prick हो गया.
The healthcare personnel must report the needle stick injury to the immediate supervisor.
Sir, I had a needle stick injury just now while doing a procedure, sir. Sir, I was doing the cannulization on a patient and I accidentally, the stillet of the cannula, it got pricked.
Where is the site of the injury?
Sir, it is this ring finger on the tip of the finger.
Tip of the.
Yes, sir.
Did it start bleeding after that?
So slight bleeding was there, but I did not squeeze it at all. Although I washed it under the running water properly, and then I reported to the in charges, and then I came here.
So that
sir.
means. Now just tell me about the source of the source. What was the patient?
So I checked the status of the patient. Although the viral load was negative,
That means the patient was not having hepatitis B.
no sir, he was.
He was not suffering from hepatitis C, and he was also not suffering from HIV.
All the staff working in the healthcare facilities must receive the hepatitis B immunization and regular health checkups. They all must go for training of occupational and healthcare program of the health facilities. The main purpose was to show you that what are the do's and don'ts, what are the various procedures that can result in sharp injury, and how we can take preventive measure. So it is very important to prevent the injuries, prevent accidents, but in case these do occur, then we must take immediate measures during the injury. Sharps are a type of infectious waste which is generated from healthcare activities. Now, what are sharps? Sharps are items that can cause cuts, punctures, or wounds. These include needles, hypodermic needles, scalpels, and other blades, knives, infusion sets, saws, broken glass, and pipettes. Now, what is the reason that we require to handle the sharps safely? There are two major reasons. One is that improper handling of these sharps can result in injuries, and the second reason is that the reuse of the needles can cause spread of infections, because the needles used in patients could again transmit the infections, because they could be contaminated with the germs that come from the patient who has been suffering from infections. Now, what are the activities that can cause sharp injuries? One of the most important activities that has been responsible for causing sharp injury is recapping or bending of needles. Second is passing the needles from one person to another, carrying the used needle for disposal, improper disposal in the general waste or in the wrong container, and trying to correct the segregation errors. The needle should have been put in the sharp container, but it is put in the yellow container, and so one takes out the needle from the yellow container to again put it in the sharp container. That is how one can get injured. Now, who are the people who are at risk of the sharp injuries? It is practically anybody who can be at risk, depending upon if they are exposed to the sharps. The nurses, doctors, hospital maintenance staff are more prone because they are directly handling with the sharps. Similarly, the waste handlers and workers are dealing with handling the waste. If it is not properly segregated and disposed, then they can get infected. And similarly, visitors, patients, if the sharps are carelessly lying around, can get pricked. And if they are not disposed of properly, carried for disposal, but just indiscriminately disposed of in the municipal waste, then the rag pickers or the community can also get a sharp injury and so get infected. Now, the three main risks which are associated with sharps are hepatitis B, tetanus, and HIV. The precautions to prevent injury by sharps, these must be followed so that the chances of getting infection is reduced. One should never recap or bend the needle. They should be immediately disposed of after use, and they should be disposed of as close to the point of generation as possible. A sharp box should be put just next to the place where the sharp is being used. If the needle syringe is being used for taking sample, the sharp disposal box should be immediately next to the bedside. Never pass used sharps from one person to another. There is no hand transfer should be adopted. The sharp container should be readily accessible where the sharps are used. That is already mentioned. The sharp container should be only 3/4 full, and segregation error should never be corrected. Now, there are various devices which are used for management of the sharps. One of them is a needle melter. This can be electrically or battery operated. The needle is melted and the plastic hub of the syringe is cut. The syringes need to be put in the red bags. The needle cutter is generally cut manually and the needles are contained in the container. The hub of the syringes is cut and the syringe needs to be put in the red bag if it is a plastic syringe. If it is a glass syringe, then we will put it in the blue container. Then there can be needle removers or puller devices which simply pull out the needle from the syringe. The needle is intact and there is no secondary handling. And again the hub of the syringe is cut. Now the Schedule 1 of the BMW Rules 2016 as amended specify that the needles and syringes should be mutilated to ensure that they are not reused. Now what are the advantages of a needle cutter? Why do we use a needle cutter? As already mentioned, they prevent the reuse of syringe either inadvertently or illegally when we cut the hub. It reduces the volume of the sharp waste significantly. There is potential recycling of the syringe barrels after disinfection, and it also removes the inclination of the staff to recap the reused needles. This is a sharps container. All of you may be aware, may have seen it in the hospitals. It is a white, translucent, puncture-proof, tamper-proof, leak-proof container having a biohazard symbol and a lid on the top so that the sharps can be easily disposed of. The advantages of such a box that has been prepared internationally for the disposal of the needles or sharps is safe segregation by impact and puncture resistance, large opening to ease the insertion of various medical sharps, easy to use by temporary closure, and no touch, twist off and insertion inlets for all kinds of needles. So that is how this box is very useful. After we have handled the sharps in this way, how do we dispose of the sharps which are collected? Autoclaving, there are three methods actually which we can use. The autoclaving or dry heat sterilization, which can be followed by shredding or mutilation. Encapsulation can be done in a metal container and sanitary landfill can be done. Now, recovery of metals from the treated and shredded waste within the biomedical waste treatment facility or iron foundries and which have got the consent of the State Pollution Control Board or Control Committee can be done under the authorization of the biomedical waste management rules. So, you saw that safe handling and disposal of sharps is important to prevent the spread of infections in the healthcare settings, and so it is all the waste, all the sharp waste should be handled safely and disposed of in a very safe manner. We shall now discuss pre-treatment. Now, pre-treatment is a terminology which is more commonly has been used specifically by the Biomedical Waste Management Rules 2016, Government of India, and other countries may not be using pre-treatment in the same context. So, we would like to explain what is pre-treatment. Pre-treatment basically means treating waste at the site of generation before giving it to the common biomedical waste treatment facility for final treatment and disposal. This pre-treatment is very important. It has been made mandatory by the Indian legislation, that is the Biomedical Waste Management Rules 2016 as amended, to eliminate any chances of spread of the infection during the storage and transportation of waste in the healthcare facility and when it is being transported to the central facility. Now, what are the categories of waste that require pre-treatment? The first and foremost are the waste in the yellow category that require pre-treatment, and these include the microbiology or biotechnology and other clinical lab waste, the chemical liquid waste, and the blood bags. Then, how do we do this pre-treatment? Let us take the example of blood bags. The discarded blood bags are counted, sealed, weighed, and then packed in an autoclave safe plastic bag or container, and then it is autoclaved before we can dispose it off in the yellow bag. Then we have got the chemical liquid waste. This is also a yellow category waste. All hospitals, as per the provisions of the Biomedical Waste Management Rules, are required to install ETP for the treatment of infectious and hazardous liquid waste. And after it has been chemically neutralized or disinfected, it can be discharged into the common sewage. Another major category in most of the big hospitals is the microbiology, biotechnology, and other clinical waste belonging to the yellow category. These also need to be pre-treated, and it must be noted that the autoclave used for disinfection should be dedicated only for the purpose of disinfection. We should not try to sterilize our equipment or test tubes or culture plates, anything. We should not use this autoclave for any purpose other than pre-treatment of waste. Now let us come to the details of pre-treatment of liquid chemical waste. The feces or the vomitus in an outbreak, this has to be decontaminated with the lime milk. The dental clinics generate amalgam, and mercury used in this amalgam should be stored safely, and then it should be handed over to the recyclers, or it can be given to the central treatment facility who will further manage it. The liquid from the radiotherapy department should also be collected separately because it has got radioactive wastewater, and it should be stored for decay. After the decay is over, it should be disposed of. The kitchen liquid waste has got the grease trap to remove the grease, oil and other floating material, and also the infected food from the TB patients. Now let us see the white category waste is also an infectious category of waste and also requires pre-treatment. These are the various types of sharps which are put in the white category waste. This is done only in the case the healthcare facility does not have a tamper-proof, puncture-proof and leak-proof container. If the facility has a puncture-proof, leak-proof and tamper-proof container, then that container is directly handed over to the central treatment facility for treatment and disposal. In such cases, when this is not available, then it is important to first disinfect the sharp through chemical disinfection by 1% chlorine solution, and after this disinfection it is handed over to the central treatment facility. Another category of waste which can be infectious and requires pre-treatment is the blue category of waste. For example, the glass vials and the positive controls, they need to be autoclaved and then discarded in the tamper-proof, blue marked or blue colored box before handing it to the biomedical waste facility. Thus, you see that the infectious waste should be rendered non-infectious after pre-treatment, and after it has been rendered non-infectious by pre-treatment can be safely transported for final treatment and disposal. Now that you are clear with the concepts of the pre-treatment, let us see a small video which tells us more about the concepts of pre-treatment.
All infectious waste generated in a clinical laboratory has to be rendered non-infectious by a process called pre-treatment. All infectious waste is put into a yellow autoclavable bag and sent for autoclaving, following which this waste is supposed to be incinerated at a facility outside the laboratory. This is a clinical laboratory. The different types of waste generated here are anatomical or pathological, infectious and sharps. The first category belonging to anatomical or pathological includes specimens, for example tissues, feces, sputum, urine, pus, blood and body fluids. The second category is infectious waste generated inside the laboratory, for example culture plates, inoculated jars, biochemical tests for identification of bacteria, ID cards for identification of bacteria. The third category is waste sharps, which includes needles, blades, scalpels, etc. We are now disposing waste according to the new biomedical waste regulations of 2016. Human tissues, including blood, body fluids, these are discarded in the yellow bag. Laboratory cultures, biochemical reactions, and cards for bacterial identification are discarded in the yellow bag. Syringes without needles, vacutainers and gloves are discarded in the red bag. Non-infectious waste such as tissues, wrappers of syringes are discarded in the white bag. Waste sharps including needles, scalpels and blades are discarded in a puncture-proof container without pre-treatment. Infectious glass slides used for staining are discarded in a solution of 1% hypochlorite. These are autoclaves where pre-treatment is conducted. infectious waste at the end of the day is heated under high pressure in these instruments, sterilizing waste before discard.
You will remember once you go back to your working in a hospital, or if you see others, doctors, nurses and the waste handlers who are generating waste, segregate it properly and also pre-treat it. Healthcare waste is the waste which is generated from activities related to healthcare. This waste requires to be segregated, collected, stored and ultimately transported for treatment and disposal. Now it is very important that the treatment of this waste which has been collected is in such a way that the waste is rendered harmless, non-infectious and is disposed of properly, so that it is no longer a threat to the environment and the health. Let us look at the various technologies that are used for the treatment of healthcare waste. Now, the treatment of healthcare waste can be divided into the burn and the non-burn technologies. Now, what are the objectives of the treatment technologies? As I already mentioned, that there are two objectives. One is to render the waste harmless and non-infectious, and the second is to reduce the volume of waste so that the disposal doesn't become a very big problem. There are two types of treatment technologies. Broadly, one is the burn and the other is the non-burn. In the burn technologies, we have got two technologies which are commonly used, and that is incineration and plasma pyrolysis, whereas the non-burn technologies consist of thermal, chemical, irradiative and biological type of technologies. Let us now learn more about these technologies one by one. We shall first discuss the burn technologies. As we already said that there are two types of burn technologies, that is incineration and plasma pyrolysis. Now, what is incineration? Incineration is basically oxidative degradation of organics when a lot of air is available and we subject the waste to a very high temperature. And there are large number of types of incinerators, but the basic operation of all incinerator remains the same. The incineration consists of 5 major stages. The first stage is that the waste is stored and prepared to be put in the incinerator. Then it is placed in the furnace or combustion chamber. The heat recovery is made. There are flue gases which are produced during the incineration, and cleaning and monitoring of the emissions is taken care of. And ultimately, after incineration, the bottom fly ash which is produced is required to be properly collected and disposed in a safe manner. So these are the 5 stages of an incineration in any kind of incinerator. Now, what are the criteria to be followed for incineration? The various criteria are given by the legislative or the regulatory mechanisms existing in the different countries, and these are the criteria that have been given by the Biomedical Waste Management Rules 2016, and they need to be stringently followed so that the regulatory authorities do not impose a fine on you. Now, you can see that the criteria depend upon, or they decide the combustion efficiency, the minimum temperature that is required both in the primary and the secondary chamber, the residual time and the minimum stack height. The other criteria that should be taken care of are the standards of the dioxins and furans which are going to be released from the incinerators, because depending upon the type of waste that has been put in the incinerator, we may have production of a large amount of dioxins and furans. The waste to be incinerated should not be chemically treated with any chlorinated disinfectants, otherwise again harmful gases can be released, and the ash of the biomedical waste should be disposed of by the common biomedical waste treatment facility or in the municipal landfill if all the metals are within the regulatory limits, so that there is no pilferage into the soil, there is no soil pollution. So it is required to be taken care of. Now, if you have been associated with the working of an incinerator, or you are working in a common biomedical treatment facility, or your health facility has got an incinerator which is functioning, there may be many problems which you may have encountered, And what are the likely causes of these problems? It is important to know so that you can find the possible solutions and address these problems accordingly. So let us look at the problems. The first is a black smoke from the stack, which basically is because of the incomplete burning of the waste, or it could be because of the not enough air. So this could be because of poor mixing and or the temperature being too high. So these are some of the reasons which you must look into, and corrective action must be instituted so that the black smoke does not come. Sometimes you may have a steady white or a blue-white smoke, and this is because there is too much of air entering the incinerator, or the temperature in the secondary chamber is too low. The other problems that can be are white smoke or white haze, which appears a short distance from the stack, and this is because the hydrochloric acid is getting condensed. You may also have smoke coming out of the primary chamber. This is because the positive pressure in the primary chamber, or because there is too much under fire air, or many highly volatile substances are present in the waste. These are some of the reasons which could be causing the smoke out of the primary chamber. There can also be a lot of combustible materials remaining in the ash, and the main reasons could be not enough under fire air, or improper waste charging, or an insufficient burn time. So these are some of the problems which you may encounter or may have encountered, and you must remember that the causes are very simple, and if they are addressed to, these problems can be attended to. Now, what are the in general advantages of incineration? Why should we use the burn technologies as a method of incineration? The main reason is because we have a great variety of waste that can be treated by incineration. The waste, healthcare waste, is highly infectious, and this will render the waste non-infectious because it is subjected to such a high temperature, and it will also reduce the volume of our waste, thus solving the problem of the disposal of the quantum of waste. There are also a lot of energy recovery options from the steam which is produced, and the treated waste is unrecognizable as ash, which is a very important thing, especially when we have pathological waste. We have large anatomical parts which become very unsightly, and they are not aesthetically acceptable when the waste has to be disposed in a landfill. So for all these reasons, incineration has been a very favored option for treating healthcare waste. But why incineration nowadays in most of the countries is on a phase out? And the main reason is because there are large harmful effects of the incinerators also. Let us look at some of the harmful effects of the incinerators. The first is release of toxic emissions. These emissions could be like dioxins, furans, heavy metals like mercury, lead, cadmium, depending upon what kind of material is there in the waste. Then the formation of the soiled ash because of the heavy metals, dioxins and furans, again they will also come in the ash, and all the emissions of the various greenhouse gases, of the various harmful substances, these all contribute to global climate change and acid rain. So because of these harmful effects, incinerators are now not a very favored option and is being banned in many countries. Let us look at the various options of the incinerators which are available for which healthcare waste can be subjected to. First is the small scale, single chamber, double chamber, pyrolytic and rotary kiln. So let us look at these incinerators one by one. What are the advantages or disadvantages? We will begin with the double chambered incinerator because this is quite frequently used. As the name suggests, it has two chambers, the primary and the secondary chamber. The primary chamber, basically it converts the solid biomedical waste into the volatile form, and the secondary chamber, basically it disperses the organics released from the waste in the primary chamber. You can have a diagrammatic view of the double chambered incinerator in which the two chambers can be seen. The lower one is the yellow one is the primary chamber, and the green one is the secondary chamber. Now the advantages of a double chambered incinerator is that it can disinfect very effectively the waste which is an infectious waste. It can reduce the volume to a large extent, more than 95%, and there are very few toxic emissions. But the disadvantage is that effective performance requires qualified operators, because if the operator is not qualified enough, then all those problems that we just now went through in an incinerator. We can see those problems, and then it can have very toxic emissions. Even the ash may become a problem. So if we do not take care and operate these incinerators in a proper manner, there can be more harm done rather than the use of using them. Another problem with double chambered incinerator is regular maintenance is required, and it has a higher cost than other incinerators. Now we come to the pyrolytic incinerators. Pyrolytic incinerators are the most commonly used incinerators for biomedical waste, because they can incinerate basically the anatomical, soil waste, chemical waste, laboratory waste and pharmaceutical waste. But we have to take care that the cytotoxic waste does not come in this. Then the waste is primarily decombusted through the oxygen deficient medium, chamber and combustion process, and the volatile excess is reduced in the primary chamber. They are burnt at high temperature in the post combustion or the secondary chamber. So we also have two chambers in the pyrolytic incinerators. Now the main advantages of the pyrolytic incinerator are that it has a high disinfection efficiency. It is adequate for all types of infectious waste, chemical waste and most of the pharmaceutical waste. But the disadvantage is that there is incomplete destruction of the cytotoxic waste. So we should not put the cytotoxic waste because it will produce very harmful effects, and also it is a very costly affair, requires high investment. Coming to the third type of incinerator is the rotary kiln incinerator, which is generally used on a commercial basis, and when we have large quantities of biomedical waste and hazardous waste fractions, then the rotary kiln is used. So it can also treat the cytotoxic waste, that is what is important about it. But the radioactive waste can disperse radiation, and so we should avoid putting the radioactive waste in the incinerators. The non-risk biomedical waste incineration would represent a waste of arises. Now waste which require caution include pressurized chamber. These should not be put because otherwise they can cause explosion in the incinerator. That is the pressurized containers, the waste with heavy metal content. These two items or these two types of waste should not be put in the rotary kiln incinerators. The advantage, as you have already seen and understood, that it is adequate for all infectious, chemical and pharmaceutical waste, including the cytotoxic waste. But the disadvantage is naturally high investment and operating cost, and again it requires a skilled operator, otherwise we are going to produce a lot of harmful substances for the environment. Now coming to the first type of incinerator that we had enumerated, and that is the small scale low cost incinerator. These are totally on a phase out, because although they are less expensive, but they cause a large number of fumes, emissions and environmental pollution. Another type that we had listed was the single chamber high temperature incinerators, because they do not have a secondary chamber, they do not have a pollution control unit, so they can be associated with toxic emissions. If they do need to be used, we should always put an air pollution control unit along with the single chamber incinerators. Now we come to the plasma pyrolysis. The plasma pyrolysis, as you can see in a schematic diagram which has been made, it is the process of thermal disinfection of organic mass at high temperature but in an oxygen starved environment. Unlike incineration, we have got very little oxygen that is supplied here for disinfecting the waste. The plasma pyrolysis is now more favored option over the incinerators and is slowly replacing the incinerators. The advantages of the plasma pyrolysis are that the volume reduction is more than 99%. It is suitable for all sites of waste, it consumes less space and is an environment sound technology because the toxic residues are low since the combustion is complete. We also do not require to segregate waste since it is useful for suitable for all types of waste. We don't need to segregate it, and unsegregated waste can easily be put for the plasma pyrolysis, and it also has energy recovery options. But there are also certain disadvantages, and the three disadvantages are that it is costly depending upon an electrical energy for its operation, and this is a relatively very new technology, so we are not very full aware of the side effects or the harmful effects that it may be having. For example, the pollutants which may be produced, how many dioxins, furans are actually being produced. More research requires to go into it before it can be used full-fledgedly to replace the incinerators. Now we have read about the burn technologies. Now let us come to the non-burn technologies. Now non-burn technologies The first type of the non-burn technologies are the low heat thermal process. Now these low heat thermal process are moist or wet thermal process and can be dry heat sterilization. We can see that what are the three types of moist or wet thermal process. These are the autoclave, the microwave and the hydroclave. So we have three types of moist or wet thermal process. Let us learn more about these different types of processes because they are very commonly used and in many places replacing the incinerators. So we have got autoclave. You can see the picture of an autoclave here. It is a closed chamber that supply heat and pressure over the time for sterilization and they validate the process to guarantee full decontamination. But there are certain problems that may crop up in an autoclave and you must know what are the problems which you may encounter while operating an autoclave. For example, there is no steam, there may be leaking valves or the door gasket may deteriorate, the temperature may not reach at the right time and the steam may escape around the door during the cycle. There may be water on the floor or in the chamber which should not be there. And you may get the articles very wet. The excessive steam in the area during the cycle or after opening can also be encountered while operating an autoclave. So these are some of the problems which if you have been operating an autoclave you may have come across some of these problems. But still autoclave has a number of advantages. Especially autoclave is very favored used for the healthcare facilities, especially for disinfection and for pre-treatment. It is also used for instruments, but one should be careful that one should not use the same autoclave for disinfecting or sterilizing equipment and for waste. We must have a dedicated autoclave for the waste. And the advantages of using autoclave for treating waste is a low operating and a low capital cost. There is minimal or almost no hazardous emissions because we are not actually burning the waste. It is also the autoclave has been used since time immemorial for the sterilization of equipment and so we have got a wide range, a large variety of autoclaves which are available, which are easy to operate, which are also accepted by the medical community and it renders the waste non-infectious. But there are certain disadvantages for which the autoclave may not be used because it is not suitable for pathological and cytotoxic waste. Since they cannot reduce the volume and so the type of waste retains its shape and it may not be a very pleasant sight after the treatment of the waste of a pathological or anatomical part in an autoclave. The fumes may be available in and they may produce odor which are undesirable and no specific reduction in the volume or change of appearance as I mentioned because of which it is not favored. Then we have a microwave. This is a picture of a microwave. You may be very familiar with a microwave. It is also used by many people in their homes for heating food, even for preparing food, grilling food. But in the case of waste, this is also one of the ways in which we can pre-treat or treat waste. And this is done by steam and the heat generated by the microwave energy. So what are the advantages of microwave? Basically, again, as compared to autoclave, it can reduce the volume of the waste to almost 70 to 80%. It renders the waste non-infectious and it can be used to treat plastics and laboratory waste but not the chemical waste. So we cannot put the plastic, especially if it is chlorinated plastic, in a incinerator because the incinerator will have very toxic fumes. But in a microwave we can have the chlorinated plastics or the contaminated plastics also put for disinfection. And there is no emissions or liquid emissions or gas emissions, and again it is very easy to use. You just have to press a button and maintain the temperature and pressure, and that's how it is used. Now what are the disadvantages? Because as any technology that we use has advantages and also has disadvantages. The disadvantages, one of the main disadvantages, it has a high capital cost as well as the large anatomical and human parts cannot be treated due to the ethical, cultural, legal and other considerations. It also cannot treat volatile and semi-volatile compounds, especially the heavy metals like mercury and radiological waste, because then it will cause unnecessary hazardous substances to be released. Now we come to the medium heat. The medium heat, we have got two types of technologies available. One is the recover depolymerization and the second is the thermal depolymerization. Coming to another variety of a non-thermal process but a non-burn technology, and that is the chemical process. Now in this we use a variety of chemical substances for disinfecting the waste and rendering it harmless. The disinfectants are like chlorine, the dioxin, the bleach, acetic acid or dry organic acid. It is most suitable for treating liquid waste and for disinfecting the medical equipment which have been contaminated with contaminated blood or infectious blood with HIV or HBV, and it can also be used for solid infectious waste in case we have a smaller setup, smaller healthcare facilities. What are the problems which may be encountered or which are associated with using chemical systems for treatment of healthcare waste? Now, there is a decreased efficiency of the disinfection. Preparation or the storage of the disinfectant is a problem because where to store and how to store. When we are using the chemical disinfectant, there is not enough contact between the waste and the surface and disinfectants. Because of them, exposure to the healthcare staff of the surface disinfectants can take place, and because of which various skin allergies, rashes can also occur. Now we come to another process, and that is the irradiative process, and that is by using electronic beams like cobalt 60 or UV radiation. This requires shielding and safety measures to prevent occupational exposures. Now they have high energy consumption, high cost of treatment, and they also require skilled and trained operators. So because of the high cost of treatment and skilled labor which is required and the high energy, we generally, because of these disadvantages, we do not use it as a very favored option. Then we have another methodology or another technology which is used, and that is the biological treatment system. In some of the countries like in Nepal, this is a very favored option, and this involves the use of microorganisms or biochemicals to decompose the waste. We include the use of enzymes and aerobic or anaerobic digestion. Another way is vermicomposting, in which the earthworms are used. Basically the waste, they are put in the waste, and because of the natural process in which they digest the waste, they can render the waste harmless. But the disadvantage of the biological system is that a lot of offensive odors may result, because most of the biological treatment require anaerobic treatment, that is in the absence of air. So in the absence of air, gases like methane are produced, and these are harmful and can cause effect on the environment as well as on the health. Now we come to a process that is used in the management of healthcare waste, and these are the mechanical processes. Now this is not a treatment option because we cannot render the waste harmless or non-infectious, but it is process which helps in the other mechanisms or other treatment technologies that are used. Because of the process that they reduce the amount of waste, they also help in increasing the amount of exposure of the waste to various technologies. So the various treatment technologies, the various mechanical processes that can be used are the shredding, the grinding, the hammer mill processing, the mixing, agitating, liquid solid preparation, conveying and compaction. So this is the picture of a shredder which you are seeing here, which is used in it's from a central treatment facility and it is being used. Now as I mentioned some of the advantages, you can see the list of advantages of mechanical process. It can render the waste unrecognizable. It will help in the volume reduction, can be used to destroy needles and syringes so that occupational injuries are minimized. And in the case of the thermal or chemical processes, it can help in increasing the rate of transfer, because it can help in exposing more surface. Once you break down the waste to smaller pieces, then it can help in increasing the exposure to these treatment technologies. But what are the disadvantages? It can add to the level of the maintenance required. You have another machine, you have to have the waste which is managed by this, and it cannot render the waste non-infectious. So these are the disadvantages, and so now you have learnt in detail regarding the various treatment technologies used for the management of healthcare waste, which can be burn or non-burn technologies. And burn can be incineration or plasma pyrolysis, whereas non-burn can be chemical. You can have low or medium thermal heat processes, can have irradiative, you can have biological, and you also have certain mechanical processes which help in the management of waste in these treatment technologies. So we have a short video.
The waste are taken off from the vehicle as per the color code. You can see here is a yellow colored waste are kept here. We have a separate room for storage, and from one by one we start collecting here and feeding. Treatment of yellow bag is done through this installed incinerator. There is a conveyor belt. From there it is a primary chamber, secondary chamber. This is the control panel. What the temperature we are going to maintain in the primary and secondary, that is display over here. So this is a main control panel. See here temperature of primary chamber, secondary chamber, even outlet that gases goes to the chimney, the temperature also maintained here. We are maintaining the temperature as per the guidelines and rules of CPCB. Then gases which after burning it is passes through duct line to Venturi scrubber. And from ID fan it goes to chimney. We have a 30-meter height chimney that ensure to pass the clean gases. The water requirement of that Venturi and scrubber is met through a effluent treatment plant that is outside, just adjacent to this building. This is effluent treatment plant. The water we are using to cool the gases from Venturi and scrubber comes taken to this plant, and after treatment, chemical treatment and tertiary treatment, it is taken back to the Venturi scrubber again to cool the gases. So it is a purely a recycling process where all the water used in the treatment process are after treatment taken to the Venturi scrubber. You see here, after unloading of waste, the vehicle is properly washed to remove any kind of infection is available. The wash water is sent to the effluent treatment plant for treatment of that waste water. We have a disinfection unit. Red colors bag and some puncture proof blue and white puncture proof are kept here, and from time that is autoclave. We are maintaining here temperature of 121 degree and pressure of 15 psi. There is a certain cycle, time bound cycle here, and after autoclaving the waste is shredded. There is a shredder unit. We ensure the waste after destruction we cut it into the pieces so it may not be used somewhere. This is the overall process we are maintaining here.
So you saw this very short video which gave you a glimpse of a central treatment facility, how the waste is being managed, the yellow category and the red category waste, how the various technologies we were using. So I think you must have now seen what we learned.